you do that kind of focused collaboration for a couple of days, and then you go and just work.
So, yeah, then it's on. Hello, hello. Hang on. Hello, hello. Can we have all 4 handsets up?
Hello, hello.
Hello? Yeah.
Keep them on mute until we're at the... Yeah, great. Cool. We're going live. Does Malloy need anything before we go live? All right. Hello, everyone. So in one moment, we're going to get started and go live. So this will be being live streamed at the same time. Oh, yes, very exciting. So give us 1 second and we'll be ready to start then. All right. I think we're all in place to go live. So if we can go live, I'll give you a 5-second delay and then I'll be ready. Fantastic. So hello, everyone. Welcome back to our audience who are joining us in the room today and to our audience that is joining us online as well for our virtual live-streamed Q&A from the Green Skills Hackathon today at the London Transport Museum. So the Green Skills Hackathon has been co-created by the London Transport Museum and students from Uxbridge High School. My name's Kate and I am one of the learning officers here at the Transport Museum. And today, I'm going to be hosting alongside one of our students from Uxbridge, Veron. Veron, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I am very excited as today we have got experts in their respective field who will be answering questions sent in from schools that we have been working with. And later on in the Q&A, we'll be opening up to the audience and our live audience as well. So please do keep questions in mind. I will now ask that our panelists do introduce themselves. Thank you.
We just do it from here. Hello everyone, nice to see everyone here. My name is Ope Robinson. I'm the Engineering Compliance and Improvement Manager in Siemens Mobility, where we service and maintain trains.
Well, afternoon everyone. My name is Samuel Seabrook. I work for Mott Macdonald. I'm a railways engineer by trade for the overhead lines that electrify it, but I also lead the rail sustainability team.
Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Tack. I'm the Global Health and Safety Manager for a company called Talis. And Talis design, install and commission all sorts of signalling equipment and transportation equipment across the globe.
Hi, I'm Ian Rawlings. I'm the Head of Profession for Vehicles Engineering at Transport for London. Me and my team help look after all the different vehicles that you see across London, the tubes, the buses, London Overground, the Elizabeth Line, bicycles, ferries, everything you can imagine.
Hi, I'm Stefan Raymond. I'm an engineering director for a company called Cubic, which you probably haven't heard of, but all likely have used on your journey here today. So if you tapped an Oyster card onto a gate or on a bus, that's a Cubic product and a Cubic system you've used. And at Cubic, I'm looking at the future of transport, so I'm looking at our research and development program to see what transport is like in 5-10 years' time from now.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much. So we're starting off our questions now, and the first question, very simple one. How would you define green skills? To start off with Opie, if you wanted to.
Okay, so how would I define green skills? So in my perspective, I would say green skills are the values, ability to nurture a green society, where I would class that as someone that can look at a resource efficient society as well as the renewable energies that we can maintain the society with.
That's great, thank you. Coming on to our second question. What green skills are a priority for developing a sustainable future? And this would go out to anyone who would be willing to answer.
So I'll start then. So, I mean, for sustainable futures, a big thing's carbon reduction. And so the skills are around how to reduce our carbon consumption, either by changing technology, by increasing energy efficiency. So the actual skills are quite broad. So in my particular field, in engineering, we're looking for development in skills in like power engineering for how to reduce transmission losses and more effective and efficient systems there. In traction systems on trains and on buses, how we can take carbon out, how do we move from diesel engines to batteries to hydrogen to other zero emission point of use technologies. How do we reduce the carbon cycle in energy production and distribution? So it's, from my point of view, those skills are really wide across the transport sector in particular.
So you mentioned something, carbon reduction there. So if I were to ask someone to say, Sam, if you wanted to say something about carbon reduction, what were your thoughts on that?
Yes, so carbon reduction kind of starts with, or we can say with each person, but there are large emitters in our societies, looking at kind of where we can get the big wins now, because we are in a climate emergency, we need to decarbonise now. So what can we do to make the big wins? Is it a technological shift? Is it a societal shift? And then once we kind of go over those kind of really large projects, as we start to decarbonise the rest of all these different sectors, i.e. transport, we can really start to look at the really niche areas, the last 10-20%, focus our energy on those to get through to projected roadmaps of net zero 2050 or 2040, depending on where you look.
Can I ask, anyone on the panel, would you be able to say, thinking about what we're discussing, if you had to pick one skill that you would say you think is the top of your list, could each of you give us what skill that would be?
Yeah, I can start with that if you want. Actually, I'll give you two, just because I can. So one is quite specific, I think it's digital skills. So a lot of devices that are deployed now are generating a lot of data, there's a lot more sensors. And that data really helps us to understand, for instance, how a transport system works, how to optimize it, how to make it more efficient, how to make it easier for people to use. But that requires the skills to analyze all that data, to understand what's behind it. So I think that's very important. The other one is more a soft skill, and I think it's curiosity. So be curious about the world, always ask questions, sort of challenge the status quo. I think that's a very important skill in your career to not accept what's always been done for the last 20 years, but challenge it and use your own expertise to think of new ways of doing things.
So I'd say something similar to Stefan, which is high level around problem solving and creativity. Actually, as a core skill, being able to solve problems and apply creative thinking, because that covers, no matter what sector of industry you work in, they're core things that we all need.
Yeah, I think building on what you've both said is being very open to considering anything. So building on the whole engineering philosophy, which is problem solving, and it's being able to think widely, to think differently, and not to discount anything in a very tunnelled way of thinking. So being open.
It's think I can build on that is empathy. We were doing this, if you've been in the workshop earlier, building a sustainable and accessible railway station, just having that empathy of those people who aren't as able as yourselves or need a different way to do things. Having that again open mindset, not just going right, this is the scope, let's just deliver it. Wait, let's think about the people or the things or the creatures using this space, and be able to work together to kind of get that common goal. So yeah, empathy and open-mindedness.
And looking at it from that human perspective. So as much as engineering is a very technical subject, we're applying it to human beings in the transportation industry. So it's thinking about how those human beings, with their limitations, with their requirements, are going to be able to use it.
I think just building on everything that's been mentioned, I think critical thinking outside the box is a major one for me, because we're looking for new solutions, and that's how we can work together to find an optimal solution for society. So from my point of view, critical thinking, but then soft skills, communication is one of the key topics that should be discussed throughout this, and that will also lead us in the right direction. So communication is a major one for me.
Great, thank you very much. So my next question would be, how would you define the green economy? So Ian, seeing as you're right next to me, together.
Green economy, oh wow. So it's another one of these really big umbrella terms, and I think actually we don't really understand what it means. It definitely means something about carbon reduction and how we get that out, and how as a country, if we want a green economy, how do we produce efficiency, more reuse of materials, how do we create almost a circular economy, how do we make stuff go round and round and round and not be so wasteful, and it applies across the board. It's not just about transport or power generation, it's about everything we do. How do we create more energy efficient homes, how do we make the medical profession more effective and efficient. You know, there's loads of different facets to it covered by that massive umbrella, and that's for me why those core skills that could apply no matter where you might work or where you might want to work are going to be really, really important. And we'll see it when you talk about it at the economy level. You see it at every level. It's not just, you know, in the strategy, it's actually down in the detail of what people are doing day to day, and how those roles will change and have to be focused on new approaches to undertaking tasks every day.
I think building on that is, you're saying that kind of from the top down, we're seeing a lot of kind of executive boards and companies come out with the slogans of we're a green company, we're a sustainable company. But if you talk to the layperson on the grounds and go, what are you doing building this site? And it might go, well, yeah, we're just kind of doing the same as usual. So it's how do we transfer that down all the way up and down the supply chain, up and down the kind of your structure of your company, and it'll be that skill to transfer that the whole workforce, which will then shift us into a green economy where everyone's on board and everyone's doing the same working towards the same sustainable future.
And building on that, as you say, it's probably much easier to put together a very high level sustainability green economy strategy, but it's actually what that means to society. So from a social value perspective, we want to make sure that people are working ethically, the justice system is right, and that everything we do people can relate to in their normal everyday lives, and that's feeding into that green economy to make the world less damaging.
Just to also feed into what you mentioned there about using the local society, so we're focusing a lot on localisation, so how can we focus on using materials within our immediate area and also making ourselves renewable and efficient within that space.
So just one of the tiny things that Thales has done on a local level. So we have a project in South Africa, and previously we were relying on labour from different countries, from different class levels, and we've specifically focused on using the local economy. So that's upskilling people, it's saving carbon because they don't have to travel far. So that was like just a small but a real example of how we're actually genuinely feeding into that green economy.
Within TfL, you know, some of our strategic stuff is in a very similar vein, is focused on how do we move people out of private cars and onto public transport, because public transport is a much greener proposition, you know, and we understand how people in London move around, and actually where our challenging areas are. And the big challenge for us is sort of the outer ring of London, where the tubes and the trains aren't so frequent, the bus service isn't perhaps as good as it is if you come to central London, and how can we shift people's behaviour? So where were we talking about how do you get it from that strategic level down to that lower level? How do we help people make good green choices every day for the support of the bigger green economy?
And it's so important that higher strategy really does have integrity and it's really genuine.
I think we were saying about kind of last point, I know we're rabbiting on. It's good about trying to get people onto public transport. It's been quite good. Again, this is what the workshops we were doing earlier. It all kind of starts with education, your mindset, how are you going to go about your life? And some people just die for the car, but I think it starts with education, and what's been really encouraging to see today through the different schools and colleges that have been here is people, when we've been designing stations, everyone's gone for a bus stop or bike storage and then put a couple of car park spaces in, but focused on this public transport and interconnected. So if you're all thinking about it, kind of a lot of years, our juniors are already thinking about it. It kind of gives a good amount of hope for when you're getting to the workforce and designing the world of tomorrow. So it's quite encouraging to see.
Yeah, it's like was said earlier, really putting the human into the center of any design, any new products. Do we understand how people use the system? How can we encourage big uptake of public transport? But really think about the passenger's point of view, not necessarily about the engineering in the first place. And I think that's where he created the green economy.
I think also just to mention it's about making it easier for the consumer. So it's easy for you to choose a greener option, and it's also readily available for you to use. So that's what we're working on as an organisation.
Great, thank you. So if you're looking more into the future, what would new and emerging green jobs be, in your opinion? But tell you what, so Sarah, if you want to start.
So looking into the future, so even simple things like facilities management. So not all of you may want to go into a purely engineering topic. So facilities management, so building management, and looking at ways that we can be more environmentally friendly, reduce our carbon within facilities, I think is a really relevant one. I think another one is system engineering. So at Thales, one of our signalling products is called Green TBTC. So that's designing out and reducing significantly the carbon emissions of our electrical train system, and finding more green options that we can apply to that signalling system. So there's two, more one hands-on and more one theoretical.
That view of looking at it from a whole systems point of view, where we're thinking with large rail infrastructure projects, say, we'll increase the size of the lines, we'll put 4 tracks instead of 2 tracks to get the amount of trains through, but then can we look at doing signalling instead so we can get the same amount of capacity? Do those joined up thinking, not just going towards what's the kind of the easiest, not obvious one, looking at how close your trains are together, but then managing the risk. So it's, again, like we were saying before, this whole skill of looking at it as a complete system, knowing who to go to get those skills. So it's that's an engineering management skill set, which is quite a niche one, but one of the skills.
That's a good point. It's actually integrating all of the different departments and all of the different functions, as Sam said.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, some roles that we've been looking at is maybe an innovation consultant. So you'll be looking at the soft skill and the hard skills. So you're finding maybe new, small, emerging organisations to work with to bring them to light. So they have great green ideas, and we can work together or partner up with them to bring it to light. And also another role that we've been looking at is maybe a solution architect, where we are looking for a new solution when it comes to maybe hybrid trains or battery trains, and how we can convert our existing models into something that's more greener.
I think the other thing is there won't be new green jobs. It will be the same jobs, but with a green focus. So the jobs that we see every day out there. So a lot of my team are involved with working with train maintainers. The train maintenance task will continue. It's just we have to do it in a greener way. And one of the things we will look more and more to is to an enlightened workforce who understand that green agenda, and getting them to help us find ways of making what we do greener every day. So it won't be a different job. It'll be a green focus on thinking. And if I look back over my 20-year career history, the the sort of focus that we've tried to engender into workforce has changed over time. So 20, 30 years ago, there was a big focus on quality. You know, we've moved into systems management, and now the green. The core jobs haven't changed, but the way you think about them has changed.
That's true. It's getting people to think about, might be a bit more advanced, but thinking of sustainability and green skills as people think about health and safety, the attitudes they have towards making sure your work site is safe, or your job or your project is safe, making sure it's sustainable in the same mindset.
Yes, that it's as important. So my job is health and safety, and I think over the last 10 years particularly, the sustainability piece has become as important, which is the right thing, and that will just continue to as well.
Yeah. The other thing with that is that I agree, I think all jobs are green jobs, essentially. I don't think there's a distinction. But it's really also have that ability to look beyond your immediate kind of focus area. So if we design a new product, new gate, for instance, we could use metal 5mm thick and be fine. But it's thinking, how do I install it? Do I need a heavy vehicle because the gate is so heavy? How do I recycle it eventually? Can I make the components reusable? Can I make them easy to swap in, swap out? It's kind of thinking about the whole product life cycle. I think that's part of a green job for me. That involves everyone in the company.
Perhaps also identifying what sort of training is required to maybe stimulate that sort of thinking.
That's right.
I think also identifying who would be right for that sort of training is also quite key.
The transition, we know what skills we need to maybe have in the future and what people should be delivering in their day-to-day projects and bits, but there'll be a transition of people upskilling those and changing their mindsets. I'm saying it's the same, there'll be the same workforce doing the same jobs in a different way. And when the people in this room will go into the workforce, it'll be, I'd argue, it will still be in that transition. So you'll be able to help promote it and kick it along the path with your mindsets and your enthusiasm, going to the workforce and being able to say, like, let's do it this different way, because you've got kind of fresh ideas and you're writing bushy tails, and you'll go in and change that existing workforce for the better.
So how would you be supporting young people for these new green jobs?
So one of the things which everybody needs is money. So we're significantly investing money in apprenticeship schemes, in graduate entry programmes, so that we're really focusing on getting the right people, encouraging young people into engineering, and financing so that we can put together good engineering training schemes in Talis, so that we can nurture that talent which we want to attract going forward. Because you all, as young people entering into your careers, you will think differently to people that have been in jobs for 5, 10, 25 years. So for me, the investment, the right investment in the right areas is really important.
I think also is considering exposure. So what sort of projects have you got available at the time to show you what green skills look like? How can you develop a concept to make it green? So when we have projects perhaps within Siemens that are working on green skills or green, I guess, Eureka, we would call it, how does that look like? How can you get involved?
Yeah, so at Cubic as well, we have a similar to Talis, a large apprenticeship program. And we also take these apprentices, they work in the innovation teams, they work across the company to get exposure to all the different fields, to get their ideas, to kind of the fresh mindset into the whole company, and obviously vice versa, they will learn skills. And I think it's an event like today as well. I think I've met quite a few of you upstairs, and it's great to engage kind of with young people to get their input, their kind of thinking, because we kind of all been in our jobs for a while. You get kind of a bit stuck in a rut, so it's sometimes quite nice to get a bit of a kick and get some fresh ideas, and events like today are great for us as well, not just for you.
I think it's also about recognising we need to upskill the workforce all the time. So yes, bringing new people in and giving them the skills, but helping existing people grow to changing demands and needs from within society. So and bringing the new generation of workforce with us. So we've just embarked on a piece of carbon literacy training for my engineering organisation, because for some of us it's a relatively new topic, and certainly for bits of certain engineering professions, it's civil engineers.
It is, yeah.
It's all a bit new to them. Concrete is a massive producer of carbon dioxide, but yeah. So it's not just about it's not just about providing skills to people at the beginning of their careers, but it's recognising there's that need to upskill and learn and grow all the time. You know, it's not just about being at school and college and university. That's that lifelong learning that a lot of our professional organisations continue to support.
Yeah, and I think a very good point Ian says, and young people as yourselves, if you enter into those careers, you can really help with existing people and upskilling them.
I think we were just saying before about how it starts early and getting exposed to what things like engineering, digital skills are. I can remember when I was kind of in high school, very early years of high school, not knowing what an engineer was, and then the boiler repair person came round and they would tell me, I drew a picture of a car and he said, oh, that, you'll be an engineer, this is what they do. So kind of started getting exposed to that, never knew what an engineer was before. So getting that kind of, planting that seed of, at least you know they aren't just people who fix cars or put up lampposts. There's this whole world of kind of excitement around engineering that's there, and there's so many possibilities. So kind of planting that seed early, showing you there are a lot of different options in kind of careers going forward, and helping you make if you are that way inclined, kind of making those choices as you go through high school, college, university or apprenticeship. So yeah, again, bits like today's, hopefully where that kind of first idea might click for some people.
So what challenges would you be facing when you're trying to create solutions to become more sustainable?
So I'll come back to what we talked about before under the green economy. It's not so much the solution, it's changing mindset. So as a public transport provider, there's lots of things I can do to be greener. You know, we've massively changed the bus fleet in London, looking at zero emission buses by 2035, across the fleet of 9,000 buses. There's lots of technology there to do that for us. The challenge is getting people to shift from their cars to more public transport with a greener footprint. That's the big challenge for us. It's not actually the technology, it's the cultural shift of society.
Yeah.
It's kind of building that, almost making the markets for what we know is right. We know that we're going to need to get people out of cars onto buses, onto public transport, kind of the sustainable transport pyramid of kind of travel demand, remoding, and then repowering. Everyone likes to go to this repower work because it's fairly easy. It's not easy, but you don't have to change many people's minds to say like an electric bus or a different traction method. Then you go up and get more people onto buses. That's where you have to start making the societal changes. So we know we need to deliver these projects and these solutions, but creating the market and the need for it is going to be quite hard. So yeah, showing people, changing people's mindset that this is the way forward.
In TfL, we introduced the ultra low emissions zone, and we were expecting that to produce a massive shift. You know, people giving up their dirty, smelly old cars and moving on to public transport, and it did produce a shift. The shift it produced is people sold all their horrible old cars and bought new ones. And so, you know, we can't always get the effect we're trying to get, because actually there's a far bigger carbon footprint in 60 private cars, even if they're on the very latest, greenest technology, compared to one bus with 60 people on it. And you know, it's really hard to find that right balance, and it's not necessarily about the hard engineering. You know, some of it comes from what Cubic Support TfL were doing with the integrated ticket offering. So, you know, moving between different modes of transport from an end-to-end journey is as simple as possible. There's lots of complexity in it, because it's about changing human behaviour. It's not necessarily about changing the physical things.
Yeah, behaviour change takes years, and it's a really challenging thing to do successfly.
It's interesting, kind of say about behaviour change takes years, but then we saw through the pandemic that things can shift on a 50 pence piece. But then that wasn't the greatest bit. But it was quite interesting to see from a social point of view what could change fairly quickly. That's it's a challenge beyond me. Is a kind of a practical engineer, kind of tangible engineer with societal change.
And I think that change happened because it was mandated, but trying to influence change through choice is much more difficult.
Going back to that easy option, people will always do something they consider quite easy. So if the easy option is to get into a car and travel that way, they'll do that. However, if we try and make our solutions more easier and accessible to the customers, and still try and aid that mindset, you might be a bit lucky in the future.
Yeah, I think it's what you said earlier. It's about communication as well, to making clear why there's a benefit to a certain solution, not just because it's the latest tech or it looks cool or it's cheaper. Making sure that people understand there's a wider benefit. It's greener, it's more sustainable. And I think that's where you achieve those
I guess it's about providing that bigger picture view.
Yeah, if you can convince people it's going to help their lives and make their lives and their families' lives better, that's probably good leverage.
So, from now this point, I'll be opening up to the audience if you guys have any questions. Yeah.
So if you've got a question, we're just going to bring a microphone over just so we can hear and that our audience online can hear as well.
Do you think sustainability can be affordable? And how?
Which element of sustainability is the first bit? But
To the customers and to the industries and to the government?
yeah, there are some elements which will be an on-cost, so I will be more expensive. But there's like I'm saying, kind of those different ways of doing things which won't necessarily bring a cost to part. So things like circular economy, where you pay for your product and you have to pay for the waste to be taken. You have to then pay for what is the waste and then pay for the waste to be taken away and recycled. The circular economy, kind of keeping that maybe necessarily in house or closing that loop, is going to surely reduce the cost because you haven't got all these non-value adding bits of a product adding into the whole cost. Your cost is kind of circular and it reduces from there.
So I think longer term, yes, it can be economically viable, but I think it needs initial, probably quite heavy investment to make it work. And you were purely talking about cost or expenditure, but I guess the other thing you've got to look at is, at what cost do we want to continue to live? But yeah, initial investment I think is always going to be required.
I think that's the key thing is what do we mean when we say can we afford it?
Can we not afford it?
I think the question is can we afford not to? And I think a lot of the things that cost, not necessarily in clear financial terms, are not really understood. The waste footprint that we create in modern society, we don't really understand the legacy cost of that. And a lot of people talk about nuclear power generation. We understand there's this massive cost legacy of nuclear power generation in the waste footprint. But actually, what's the waste footprint of coal? The environmental scars of coal. And the same, and it's something we are going to have to think about in a lot of the other technologies. We talk about modern battery vehicles, for example. Actually, there's a massive footprint associated with the extraction of materials required for modern battery chemistries. There's some pretty specialist battery chemistry out there, and it requires us to mine materials out of the earth. The earth is finite, We've seen it from space, it's only so big. We have got to work out more and more how to become sustainable, because otherwise we will just collapse around us. So we're going to have to find ways of making it economic.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's also a change in the way we define affordability. In the past, it was purely the economic cost of making a thing and maybe recycling it. But now it's also the societal cost. And as you said, can we afford not to do anything? What's the cost of that? And if you balance those, then I think sustainability is affordable.
But it's a really good question. It's very difficult going back to normal people like us in society. You will look at green, environmentally friendly options in the supermarket, and they generally are more expensive. So that doesn't help make things attractive.
So that's really good point. Actually, what everyone sees is those supermarket prices of the green alternative, or like the ticket price on an electric vehicle, and go, so it is more expensive. But then in industry, there's so many different bits that aren't just those kind of products that are sustainable and green. But everyone, because they see those, the vast majority of people see those ticket prices on the high street, will make those associations. That's an interesting thought.
Thank you. I like the idea of the long-term stability, certainly the long-term affordability. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was wondering if there were going to be any new qualifications or more qualifications for any of the jobs in the business for future, also for people interested in sustainability.
Any new qualifications? I know there's new T skills. T courses, but from mine, so I graduated 3 years ago, so I'm relatively new to the workforce. But I did A-levels and also a sub-diploma, which is kind of BTEC, which is more hands-on. And then I went to university. But that combination of having kind of academic skill set and the mind frame coupled with the hands-on tangible skills is what's given me a good appreciation now of the things that I implement in my designs when I'm doing things, whether it's a technical point for overhead lines for the railway or trying to implement something sustainable. I've got a better appreciation of how it might impact the person on the ground, instead of going, oh yeah, why can't they just do what I'm designing for? It's be able to step the other side of the mirror and look at how it's actually being used. So a good combination of kind of your academic, theoretical mindset and abilities combined with a tangible ability to have a skill of making something or interacting with something.
I don't think the qualifications themselves will change unless government decides to come along and give them all a different name. The content might, though, in some of that detail, but that's been no different for the last 50 years or so. The content of individual qualifications has changed, and I'm sure if you talk to your teachers about what they were teaching in GCSE and A-level 10 or 20 years ago is different now. The core qualification is unlikely to change, but the detailed content might evolve as our understanding and our expectation. And there is a lot of involvement between industry and the education sector. It's a bit remote and it's a bit tortuous at times. But this morning I was sat on a group with the Professional Institute that I'm a member of, the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, talking about skills and what we want to do to influence the education sector and government to make sure that we're providing students coming out of schools, out of university with the right skills to go into industry.
And I think building on that, so if you now do a BTEC in railway engineering, for example, within that course now there is a module on sustainability and a module on how you apply that in that particular profession. So as Ian said, I think the courses probably stay the same, the qualifications stay the same, but the actual content of it definitely evolves.
There's an economist, his name is Paul Hawkins, I don't know if you've heard of him, but his idea about industrialisation is the whole system needs to be changed instead of just a certain sector of industrialisation. So this is mainly talking about transport, but do you think that you can correlate or use food businesses to help you increase sustainability in this sector of industrialisation? I'm not sure if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the question is not just transport. Does every sector need to fundamentally change? And the answer is yes. And there's bits and bobs we can do kind of around the edges, change the normal things we're doing, but it fundamentally needs a reshift. We've seen, like we mentioned, the thing about food. It's going towards more plant-based diets, but again, how do we do that sustainably? So the people who are farmers, who are beef farmers or lamb or have livestock, we don't just go, no, right, you don't have a job anymore, we're going down this way. That's not sustainable for their livelihoods and their economies. How do we do that kind of transition, or are we allowed to still have a niche section of some parts of society which give us kind of what makes a nice society is a variety, but also we need to make sure again it's sustainable. That's the transport, food, or I don't know, more examples.
Yeah, and I think transport is actually a great sector to drive that transition or to look at that, because a lot of things need to be transported, not just people, but also goods. So we can change our system or design our system so it's easier or more sustainable to transport food, for instance, at short distances, or your Amazon delivery, which has a big impact on the environment. Can we make that more sustainable can we use public transport to transport those parcels as well. So I think transport is actually a great industry to think about this wider societal change and enable that.
I think also we're becoming more and more and more integrated.
Yeah.
So as Stefan's talked about, lots of industries rely on transportation, about moving goods as well as people, but also, there's also the whole supply chain as a whole. So, as we move to decarbonised transport, electrification of the railways, for example, that relies on us working out sufficient decarbonised power generation in the first place, so which has a wider impact across all of society that consumes energy. So there's so many interrelations, you can't avoid the cascade of effect and the propagation of good ideas between different sectors.
Can you expand on how you can be accountable for your climate goals and projects? Like, for instance, during the workshop, some companies were being really vague and general. How some companies they would say something more detailed, on their plan for 2050. Do we as the public get to know what's going to go on behind the scenes? Will you post a report every year or quarterly?
So some specific stuff. So. We're currently buying new trains to the Piccadilly line on London Underground. The existing train is an electric train, so it's pretty much low carbon as it is. But there's no energy recovery in that train. So when the train slows down to a stop in the station, effectively the energy is turned into heat. With new technology, we can regenerate 80% plus of that energy, and we can turn it back into electricity to feed back into the system. So that's one of the key things that we are doing with where we've already got fairly green technology within London Underground, because it's already an electric railway and has been for many, many years. That's the sort of change we're looking at. Similarly, in the bus space, we're looking at how we take carbon out of the bus chain. So 9,000 buses in London. How do we take all of those diesel engines that almost all of those 9,000 buses are powered by and get rid of all the on-street emissions? So we have work streams at the moment looking at lots of different technologies. So we have hybrid buses, so a very large proportion of those 9,000 buses in London are hybrid. So whilst it hasn't eliminated carbon emissions at street level, it has significantly reduced it. But we have a growing number of all electric, either battery or hydrogen technology vehicles, so more push to take those out. And TfL is really at the cutting edge of trying to push that technology forward, which hasn't traditionally been taken up in the bus space. There's been a huge amount of uptake in domestic cars because there's so many people out there buy them. There's a really big market for those big motor manufacturing companies, all those global names that we know. There's a huge market, a huge demand to do that. The bus sector is really quite small. It's really quite a long life asset, 20, 30 years life out of a bus, and there isn't the driver in many places around the world for these relatively small markets for them to take carbon out. So TfL is really pushing hard to push the technology to take that carbon out. So those are two specific examples. There are lots of others, and we could sit here and talk all afternoon and all day tomorrow about it. But those would be two specifics that I'd talk about, and that we do try and publicise.
And just backing up what Ian says, so specifically what Thales are doing, because we are a supplier to Thales with our signalling systems. So what we're really focusing on is the technology to increase the amount of trains per hour we can have on existing tracks. So that's reducing carbon because we're not having to have projects to build new tracks, which will take concrete, take civil engineering, big carbon footprint. So we're supporting TfL's focus there on having more trains per hour on existing tracks.
I think part of the question to maybe take it is, how do you see through greenwashing? You'll see a lot of companies, whether it's industries like ours or clothing manufacturer, retailers, saying, yeah, we're green, we're sustainable. And how would you see through that? And it's challenging each other. You go, well, how are you sustainable? You go, oh, we use paper bags. And you go, right, what about the rest of your products? It's holding people to account and challenging them, which I appreciate might be a bit weird at kind of younger ages that you all are. But kind of taking that, like we're saying from TfL, Macdonald is accredited to what's called PAS 2060, which is the carbon neutral standard. And we look through all our carbon emissions and have compliantly accredited them and counted them. And we know that we are a carbon neutral company. There's online reports you can read about how we measure our emissions, where we do reduce them, and where do we offset them. So that's one instance of that's how we're accredited and accountable. Then if you see a company, they say our staff are sustainable. If you spoke, like we're saying, up and down the kind of the chain of command, if you talk to people at either end of it and saying how are you doing sustainability, there'll be somebody at this moment in time, I'd argue it would be the vast majority of them who would go, I don't know, we're not. And that, I would say that's your company isn't sustainable. Having 100% of your staff sustainable would be great, but I think it's not achievable now. But having the vast majority of people knowing what sustainability is and actively applying it into their work, that's when you can truly, I think, call yourself a sustainable company.
Like, I understand, but like, what would be like the consequences for if like a certain like branch would be like not following the sustainability that like what your company believes in?
Say it again, I couldn't hear.
Like, what would be the consequences of like if one branch of like your company would not be like as sustainable as you are like saying to the people?
Okay, so from a commercial perspective, one of the consequences could be that we wouldn't win any further work. So that's a really bad thing for us. From a commercial perspective, we have to be sustainable and we have to be able to demonstrate that genuinely. Otherwise, we won't win more work. But ethically, the consequences are catastrophic. It's going back to the green economy and the fact that we won't achieve that, which is going to make our planet a very sad place for future generations.
Certainly, that would be the TfL position. I mean, we're not competing for work, but we're buying products from the people who surround me. And more and more we put focus on, when we're asking suppliers to bid for work, demonstrating their green credentials, and we have quite a rigorous process to support that. And also, how TfL is funded. So, the COVID pandemic has had a massive impact on TfL and its funding arrangement. Before COVID, we were entirely self-funded from the fare box, and it looks like that's unlikely to continue, and we're going to rely on government funding, as we have done throughout the COVID period and up to April 2024. We're likely to still need government funding for the big investments that we want to do. We're going to need those big investments to get the shift in people. So, things like the Bakerloo Line extension. We've talked about the Bakerloo Line extension for a number of years. The Bakerloo Line extension has that potential to shift people because the southeast corner of London that's very poorly served by the tube and rail network at the moment is an opportunity for us to tie it in. But that will require significant government funding. If we can't show to government that we're reducing our carbon footprint, that we're being more sustainable, we're taking more sustainable approaches, not just in our operations, but in our big capital investments, how we build new infrastructure, can we do it in a more sustainable way, which we've tried to do with things like we can demonstrate from the Northern Line extension and what we've done to build the Elizabeth Line, what we're doing at the moment with the Silvertown Tunnel, to be able to credibly demonstrate to government that we can deliver more sustainably. We will need to do that to get investment from the government to do the future projects to move us further along on that journey.
Yeah. And another aspect of this is also the staff themselves. So if there's parts of the company where there isn't a focus on sustainability, no one really cares, it will have an impact on how staff perceive the company. So almost everyone in our workforce wants to work for a sustainable company, and we have challenges on retaining our staff. So if they see that, say, Cubic doesn't focus on that area, they might go to a competitor that does. So there's also that aspect of the whole health of the company and the health of the workforce, which is obviously important to us.
Really good question, though.
Brilliant question.
Really thought-provoking question.
Very fantastic. Yeah, well done. And we've got time for just one more. I think we had one down the front here. Yes, my friend over here. We're going to send you a microphone across. Pass along, and that will be probably our last question.
What would be the main benefits of was I going to say? I don't know, I forgot. Wait, just give me a sec. I don't know how I forgot.
Well, we just make a way for a while. We just make a way. I believe you're. Yes.
We were all talking. You all were talking about how the transition from diesel and petrol cars to electric cars will be beneficial and good for our carbon to be carbon neutral. But wouldn't it increase our carbon emissions because the amount of energy is used to make that battery? And if we're talking about mass numbers of in that transition, wouldn't that really be do more harm than good?
Yeah, so this comes back to one of the earlier points about, is sustainability affordable? And that's that really good question, is what's the entire embedded carbon in the life cycle of an asset? And cars are a really good example of that. How much carbon is there in the manufacturing of it? Actually, we've got really good at recycling cars. Fortunately, there's a lot in them that's quite easily recyclable. There's a lot of metal content in them, a lot of glass that's easily recyclable. But I come back to my point, TfL's view is that we want to shift people out of their cars onto public transport, because ultimately that's the far more sustainable option, because we can produce lower carbon footprint vehicles individually, but actually by getting more people on them, the carbon footprint per journey, per mile travelled, that's where you get the real impact in reduction. And that's why public transport, certainly in really big cities, and even some of the more minor cities, that's why getting people to shift to public transport is so important, because that's where you'll get the efficiency change. But that's why the challenge is not necessarily in the technology, it's in that perception, that cultural shift, that willingness to change the way you operate. And we talked earlier about some of the things we do on accessibility on stations. Putting yourself in the view of someone else. How do they perceive the use of that service? Is it as easy, as painless, as integrated? Does it provide you with the flexibility that you need? We talked about increasing trains per hour, for example. One of the London Underground pushes is what we call a turn up and go service. So effectively, a train more frequently than every 6 minutes, because above 6 minutes people need to plan a bit more. You want a timetable, but if you can get it below 6 minutes, people are pretty much just prepared to turn up. Oh, there'll be a train in a minute, I'll get on it, it'll be fine. It's those sorts of shifts, and that's where some of the technology comes in, but it's how we sell that to people and shift those behaviours.
So what we really want to do in the transport sector, in all of our industries here, is encourage people to get on transport so they don't need to buy an electric car, so they don't need to then get rid of their other old diesel car or whatever. So it's not the car manufacturer, it's getting people onto transportation run by the public.
There's one of the interesting sectors that we're just starting to explore in Transport for London is automated vehicles, automated road vehicles. And that might be, where we go next with public transport. It may be that there's a fleet of smaller vehicles that offer more flexibility. So I've got a car. I work for a public transport organisation. I've got a car at home, but it's parked on the drive. It's parked on the drive, going nowhere 80% of the time. That's not necessarily really good use of that asset. But if we could share the operation of it and the ownership, all that baked-in carbon of building it and disposing of it, you could get some efficiency out of. So that might be where it is. What does the public transport offering look like? What does new and emerging technology on automation, on signalling for road vehicles? What does that look like, and could that shift behaviour?
To kind of answer the technical question, because it definitely is the way to go is get onto public transport, or use bike or walking. To answer the technical one, yes, you're right. There's so much embodied carbon with cars in general, not just EVs, but there's a different type of embodied carbon, because you don't have the embodied carbon of digging up the petrol, refining it, shipping it, etc., etc. So there's a different source of embodied carbon. If you think of where we are in the time scale of the development of the battery, or the kind of the modern traction battery, is only 10, 15 years. You think how long an ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle, has been developed for the past 100 years. You think in the next 10 years we're not going to have the same chemistries, we're going to have a abilities to recycle, and recycling is a key thing. So when your battery's gone, it's run out of its lifespan, you can turn that back into another one. These technologies coming through should aim to reduce the embodied carbon and make it more recyclable. But we're only really at the crux of the electrification of our transport system in some niche areas.
Brilliant questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. They were really fantastic and very insightful, so well done to you all. And I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. If you would like any more information about today's event, you can always reach out to us at ltmschools@ltmuseum.co.uk, or if you'd like to join the conversation on social media, the hashtag for today is LTM Hackathon. So thank you so much to everyone, and over to Ron.
Round of applause, please. And to finish off, I will be passing on to Rebecca and students.
What an incredible... What an incredible Q&A we've just had.